Hello, my name is Aubrey. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to another episode of Recent Reads. I'm pretty sure that my last wrap-up was in March. Most of you who have been following my channel will know that I have just been in a god-awful reading slump. It has truly felt like the reading slump that would never end. It started in April and then lasted all summer, and then at the very beginning of August I was like starting to come out of it, and then these past few weeks I have been reading a ton. So I actually have quite a stack here. I was trying to hold out until the end of September so it could be kind of a September wrap-up plus some things that I read earlier in the year, but I just have so many that I'm like already a little bit overwhelmed. I think I'd like to go ahead and talk about them in sort of a recent reads type fashion. So the first book I've got is Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. Again, I read this back in April. I enjoyed this. This is sort of a Chinese folklore inspired story. We are following our main character Jing Yan, who is the daughter of the Moon Goddess. And the Moon Goddess is actually a prisoner of the Celestial Kingdom, and she was imprisoned on the moon because she stole a vial of immortality. And the Celestial Emperor actually has no idea that Jingyan exists, and so her whole childhood and existence is like kept a secret until one day someone from the Celestial Kingdom visits the Moon Goddess, and unfortunately Jingyan's magic chooses that moment to flare up. She is forced to flee from her home and sort of go on the run so that she doesn't ever get discovered. And it's about her trying to make a life for herself and eventually trying to clear her mother's name and win her mother's freedom. She ends up working as a servant for this like truly horrible woman, but through that job she is able to meet up with the prince. The prince sort of sees in her something special and interesting. She ends up going through this like mini trial type thing to prove herself, and then she ends up working alongside the prince and learning from him, and she ends up becoming this great warrior. I definitely really enjoyed this. Like, I love folklore and mythology, and I especially really love Chinese folklore and mythology, and so I did really enjoy all of those aspects. I ended up giving this 3 stars because there were just a couple of things that kept me from like truly loving it the way that I wanted to. One was the writing style, which I found really repetitive to a very distracting fault. And 2, there is a really unnecessary love triangle and a trope that I really hate, which significantly brought it down a peg. Like, I just found it so eye-rolly in just the worst way. And like, I'm not a huge hater of love triangles. Like, if done right, I actually really enjoy a love triangle. This one just felt unnecessary in the worst way. I also remember feeling like we were skipping a lot of things. Like, we've got to cover a lot of ground and show a lot of time passing, and so there were things that we were told happened that I really wanted to see for myself, but unfortunately we don't end up getting to see. It does really wrap up nicely. Like, it feels almost like a standalone, and for that reason I think I'm going to stop here. I'm not really interested in reading the sequel, especially because I have not heard very good things about the sequel. And so all in all, it was a good book. Like I said, I gave it 3 stars. For me, 3 stars is a book that I enjoyed, maybe not something super memorable or a favorite of all time necessarily, but I did enjoy my time with this, and I would still recommend it, especially if you're interested in reading it. Like, if you like Chinese mythology and folklore. I know a lot of people loved this more than I did, so you might very well be in that camp. I would still try it out and see what you think. All right, next up I read The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. Again, this was in April, so quite a while ago. It's a little bit hard to talk about because there's so little plot. We're following, I think, 3 to 4 different characters who are all separated at the beginning of the novel. They've got their own things going on, and we slowly watch as they all kind of converged together by the end. So far, I am a huge fan of Joe Abercrombie's writing. I think he's a really good writer and very funny. He just has a very witty, almost dry humor that I really appreciated. And 2, his character work, which is pretty famously something that Joe Abercrombie is very good at. So I enjoyed all of his characters. Characters that you would not enjoy in other contexts are so well written and interesting in here. Again, pretty famously, Glokta is just a fascinating character. He's a torturer. He's very good at what he does. In a lot of ways, he's also this very sad, broken person. He's been through just like a truly horrific trauma. He himself was tortured. He had every other tooth ripped out. So he's got every other tooth, but then they did the opposite on the top of his teeth. So none of his teeth fit together. He can't eat. He's crippled. His body hurts all of the time. We come to find out that he was actually like a really promising young man. Like, he was an excellent swordsman and he should have gone on to great heights, except that this horrible thing happened to him. And so you can't help but feel bad for the guy, you know, even despite what he does for a living. And also his inner monologue, like his inner thoughts are so funny. I mean, he is just ruthlessly witty and sarcastic. He is so much fun to be around, and his chapters were my favorite by far. But I also really enjoyed Jezel's chapters. He's this sort of like pompous, pampered rich boy who's had absolutely everything handed to him. He doesn't know how to work hard. He doesn't want to work hard. He's very lazy. He just wants to drink and gamble. He is a very unlikable character in this. I don't know, just the way that his chapters are written, they're infused with so much irony and just a complete lack of self-awareness. And so we're very much laughing at him, but I'm still laughing, you know? And so I did really enjoy it. I enjoyed like the juxtaposition between the grimdark elements and the humor. Like, I found that it balanced out really well, and I did really enjoy the characters. So I'm looking forward to continuing. I will say that I don't know that I fully have a good grasp on the world building here. I don't know if that was just me or if it's not very well explained in this first book. I'm hoping to get a better grasp of how this world works in the next installments, because there are a few things that I'm like a little bit confused about. So if any of you have read this, if you could let me know if that's like to be expected or if I should maybe go back and do like a light reread of this before continuing on. But yeah, this was a 4-star. I really, really enjoyed it. Then I read Dance of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson, and I believe this is the last one that I read in April. This is the spin-off duology in the Remnant Chronicles world that Mary E. Pearson has created. So it is set in the same world as the Remnant Chronicles, but it's very much its own thing. We're following new characters, and while there are like hints at what happened in the Remnant Chronicles, we hear about some of those characters. So far, we haven't met any of them, like they don't play a big part. So I think you could totally read this outside of the Remnant Chronicles if you were more interested in this. Unfortunately, this was another 3-star read for me. I ended up being really disappointed with this. I absolutely loved the Remnant Chronicles when I read it. It just had the perfect amount of like slow burn romance and action and adventure with really interesting politics and a little sprinkling of magic. Like it really worked for me, and I was really looking forward to reading more within this world. And I had also heard that this was a enemies to lovers romance, and I was really excited about that because I thought that if anyone could do that really well, that Mary E. Pearson could. I am a huge fan of enemies to lovers, but I want something very specific when I talk about enemies to lovers. I want the characters to actually be enemies at the beginning of the book. I want them to form some kind of reluctant allyship. I want them to slowly become friends, and then I want to watch them fall in love. And it's got to happen in that order for it to be good slow burn enemies to lovers, okay? And unfortunately, this just happens so fast. The characters fall for each other right at the beginning of the novel, and while there are still like secrets and maneuvering and backstabbing, the heavy attraction is still there from the beginning. There's no angst, there's no yearning, there's no tension, and it was just a big letdown for me. I did still enjoy the characters on their own, and I liked all of the side characters, and I really like this world that Mary E. Pearson has built. So all of those things were very, very good, and I enjoyed them quite a lot. I guess I should tell you what this is about, but I honestly can't even remember it that well. We're following Kazi, who is this like street thief turned weapon of the queen, as she is supposed to infiltrate this like outlawed family and their, I don't know, kind of compound. They're living on territory that's kind of being disputed between two kingdoms as to like who owns it, I think. And she's supposed to be sort of spying on them and seeing if they're doing anything illegal. If I remember correctly, like I said, it's been a while and I just don't remember all the exact details, unfortunately. But I did like it well enough, and I will read the second one eventually. And again, this is another one that I would still recommend trying out if it sounds interesting to you. I think this is a very popular book on TikTok, and I know a lot of people really want their romance to start earlier than I do. I'm very much a slow burn girly, but you know, if you want kissing and chemistry like right away, this might be right up your alley. All right, and then I read Vinland Saga Volume 1. I'm holding up Volume 2 because I don't know what I did with Volume 1 after I read it, which I am actually almost done with. But this is a very brutal Viking story. We're following this teenage boy who has ended up on this like sort of Viking pirate ship, and we come to find out that the captain of that pirate ship murdered his father. And this boy has his heart set on killing this pirate in a duel. So he wants to do it the right way, I guess. You know, he doesn't want to just smother him in his sleep. It's got to be in a duel. It's got to be like the proper Viking way, I guess. And it's just this very gruesome story. We flash back to the past where we see him sort of growing up. We get a better sense of who his father was and his family and what he's left behind. And then we're also following him in the present as he's working for these pirates, fighting in the war against England. It's very good so far. Like, it's really interesting. It's like a little more gruesome than what I was sort of prepared for, but it is still really good. I have been slowly making my way through them. Like I said, I'm almost done with volume 2. So yeah, at this point, I am planning to continue on. I've heard really good things about certain arcs that come later in the series. I know this is very famous, is very well loved in the manga community, so I am committed to reading several volumes before really making up my mind as to whether the series is for me, but so far so good. I think I gave volume 1 4 stars, and so far I would say the volume 2 is 4 stars as well. If you're looking for like a really gritty historical manga series to read about Vikings, I would highly recommend it. All right, next up, I read the Trials of Morrigan Crow books, 1 through 3, which are all that are out currently. These are the books that started to get me out of my reading slump. I had just been in a reading slump for such a long time. I had tried to read this twice before and enjoyed it both times, but just didn't finish it for whatever reason. I had acquired the audiobooks for these, and I just thought it might help to read something that I had already read before. And hey, it worked because I really enjoyed all of these so much. This is a whimsical middle grade series. We're following Morrigan Crow, who is a cursed child, and cursed children are said to die on eventide on their 12th birthday. And so Morrigan has spent her whole life knowing that she is going to die. Her family basically treats her as if she's already gone. And even worse, because she is a cursed child, everyone in the town believes that anything that goes wrong is her fault. So if you fall down and twist your ankle, Morrigan Crow did it. If your crops are failing, Morrigan Crow did it. Your pet hamster dies, you know? And so she's just sort of lived this unhappy life. She's been blamed for everything. She doesn't have any friends. People won't even really look at her because she's bad luck. And on the night of eventide, the night that she is supposed to die, a wonderfully whimsical man named Jupiter North shows up and whisks her off to this wonderful world of Nevermore. And in order for Morrigan to get to stay in Nevermore, she has to complete the wondrous society trials, and if she can get into the society, she's got a seat at the table for life. And they're all just really wonderfully whimsical and charming. They're funny, and I just really enjoyed these. I love Morrigan. I find her so endearing and often very relatable. I liked each of these more and more, so I gave book 1 4 stars. I enjoyed it quite a lot. Book 2 I thought was even better. I gave this 4.5 stars, and book 3 I have liked the most, and I gave this one 5 stars. I just really enjoyed these. If you like middle grade, from time to time, I highly recommend these. I thought they were so whimsical. They had enough adult humor to be enjoyable. They have good plotting and pacing and mystery, so I really do feel like these could be enjoyed by all ages. And then I read The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune, and this book won me over big time. I went into this a little bit skeptical of the hype. I've learned to be a little bit wary when it comes to books that are sort of universally praised, and to keep my expectations tempered, you know? Of course I went into it hoping to like it. I was hoping that it was at least going to be a 4 star. As I read, it just sort of slowly grew on me more and more, and then by the end of it, I just absolutely adored this book. So we're following Lioness Baker, a caseworker who is very, you know, by the books, follow the rules, do things properly. And he is in charge of going to various magical orphanages and making sure that they are appropriate and good environments for the children that they are taking care of. Should one of these orphanages be shut down based on his recommendations, well, what happens to those children is none of his business. He's done his job. That's the end of it. And so he gets sent on this like very hush-hush, high clearance assignment to this mysterious orphanage full of somewhat odder and more dangerous magical children, one of which ends up being the Antichrist himself. And it's just about how he really grows to love these children and how they grow to love him. There's a romance between him and the children's caretaker, Arthur. And it's just really so sweet. Like, it's just so sweet. And I know for some people it will be sickly sweet, you know, it'll be too twee. It had enough humor and darker elements that kept it from being too sickly sweet for me personally. There were just a lot of moments that genuinely made me laugh out loud, like actually laugh out loud. I thought the romance was really lovely. Like, I am a sucker for found family and second chances and orphans or foster children that like find families that love them and want them. And so this just had a lot of ingredients that I really loved, and I loved it. So this was a 5-star for me. If books can make me genuinely laugh out loud or make me actually cry, typically get 5 stars, and this book did both. Yes, absolutely. I loved this. It was worth the hype for me. It was just charming and whimsical in all the right ways, and I'm really looking forward to the sequel coming out this fall. All right, so after I finished The House on the Cerulean Sea, that was around the time that I decided to stop reading exclusively fantasy. I could tell that I was wanting to read other things and that I wasn't letting myself, mostly because of my YouTube channel and my branding. I let myself off the leash, so to speak, and I have read 7 books so far this September, which is pretty good for me, and the month's not even over. First up, I read Margot's Got Money Troubles by Ruthie Thorpe, and for this I listened to the audiobook, which is narrated by Elle Fanning, and I highly recommend it. She did an amazing job. And in this we're following Margot, who is a 19-year-old girl who has an affair with her English professor and ends up getting knocked up. She drops out of college in order to have the baby. She discovers very quickly the difficulties of being not only a single parent, but being so young, having no money, no safety net. Nobody seems to understand. Nobody seems to think that she made the right choice. She gets fired from her job because she can't find anyone to watch the baby because, you know, this brand new newborn baby needs to be with her most of the time. And so using what she knows about her father's like pro wrestling days and like creating a character, she starts an OnlyFans in order to support her and the baby, also be able to stay home with the baby. And it's just kind of about that journey, the obstacles of like being a brand new parent all on your own, trying to figure out clever ways to get people to subscribe to her OnlyFans in the first place, coming up with interesting content to get those people to stay, you know, the scrutiny and judgment that she faces from the people surrounding her. It was very interesting. It was a really good read. It's written both in first person and third person. So she'll start a chapter by saying, I did this and I did that. And then she'll switch to like, Margot did this and Margot did that. And it's almost as if those parts of the story are like the harder parts to tell. And so she's got to like distance herself from what happened. It was just a really interesting read. It was funny. It was relatable. While I've never been pregnant, had children, had an affair with a teacher, or started an OnlyFans, the feeling of being young and unmoored, the world being this just terrifying place, and just trying to figure out how to take care of yourself, wanting to be an online personality of some sort. There were just a lot of things about Margot that felt universally relatable, and I just really liked her, and I liked this story, and I thought that it had a really interesting progressive message about sex work, if you can even call it that. She is frequently like looked down upon and scrutinized for being slutty, even though what she's doing, it doesn't actually involve sex. So I don't know, it was just a good story. Like, I liked it. I was really drawn into Margot and her character and her story. I found it very compulsively readable, and again, Elle Fanning's narration added a lot for me. So yeah, I really liked this one and I gave it 4 stars. All right, after that I read Annie Bot by Sierra Greer. I also listened to this on audio, and I feel like I could write whole essays about Annie Bot. Like, I found this to be just an absolutely fascinating novel. We are following Annie, who is a robot. More specifically, she is a sex bot girlfriend simulator. She is owned by her boyfriend, Doug. Annie used to be a cleaning bot until Doug upgraded her to being a cuddle bunny, but she's a custom model, so she also has a personality and the ability to grow and learn and evolve. So she's got just like a more advanced AI setting. And it's just about this like very toxic relationship that she has with Doug. I want you to ask yourself, what kind of man would want a robot as his girlfriend, like as his actual girlfriend, like not somebody who would just fuck a robot. Somebody who wants a robot for a girlfriend, for companionship, okay? Because Doug is the biggest man-child you could ever imagine. At the beginning of the novel, a lot of their tensions come from the fact that Annie used to be a cleaning bot, and now she is a cuddle bunny, and is therefore no longer very good at cleaning. She's willing to do it, and she's willing to learn, because of course her entire purpose for existing is making Doug happy. And a lot of the early tension in the novel is the fact that like the apartment isn't clean enough for Doug. He's displeased with her for it not being up to his standards, but it's the kind of thing where, for example, he'll say,
Annie, you need to remember to vacuum under the furniture. Like, you need to remember to move the furniture and vacuum underneath it. Like, it's disgusting under there.
Annie's like, okay, I'll do that. And then he goes to work and he comes home and Annie's like, oh, I cleaned under all the furniture like you asked me to. And he's like,
wow, you really know how to make me feel like shit, don't you?
Right? And so he's just this like walking immature contradiction. He wants Annie to be interesting and funny. He wants her to surprise him and to keep the illusion that she's a real woman, but not to the point where she ever questions him or disagrees with him or has her own opinion on anything. There's a point in the book where she's reading like a French novel because she has a bunch of languages hardwired into her, and so she can read lots of different languages. And she's reading this book in French on the couch, and he's like,
you know, I know that you're smart already, like you don't need to read that in front of me.
And so much of the novel is this exploration of this just really emotionally abusive relationship, this exploration of power dynamics. Can you ever have a healthy, loving relationship with somebody that literally owns you? And I mean, of course, the answer to that question is no, but it's, again, it is such an interesting exploration of it. There were so many parts of this book that I found just like disturbingly relatable. There's a part where Annie gets taken in for maintenance, and they do kind of like diagnostics on her, and they can see that like her battery is draining at an unusual rate. It's because she's having to spend so much mental energy trying to keep Doug happy. He can never seem to be quite happy enough with her, because there's a part of him that's like really disgusted with himself for having her as his girlfriend. It's embarrassing, right? But he still has her and he still prefers her to, you know, real women. There's just no making him happy. Annie has to do so many mental gymnastics trying to like keep him happy and predict what kind of moods he's going to be in and how to prevent bad moods from occurring. She's just having to constantly say the right things and do the right things. And when she fails, she doesn't always have the right context to understand why. She doesn't fully grasp that there's a part of Doug that doesn't like himself and doesn't like that he's in this relationship with her. And so when she says something that makes him feel shitty about himself and he lashes out at her, she like can't figure it out, and she internalizes it, and it's a hard read. Like, it's a hard book to read. There were a lot of parts that were deeply uncomfortable, but it was also just so good, and it was so thought-provoking, and I just really liked it. It was a 4.5 for me, and I would say that the only reason it didn't quite get a 5-star is because there were like two big things that I felt like were foreshadowed that then didn't happen, and I'm about to tell you what those are. So if you consider me telling you something that doesn't happen in the book to be a spoiler, you might want to skip ahead. But first of all, we are told very early on in the book and multiple times throughout the book that Annie was designed to look like Doug's ex-wife, and it's also brought up several times that he does not under any circumstances want his ex-wife to find out that he has done this and that he's, you know, dating a robot. And so I was really hoping for some kind of confrontation. Like, I was really hoping to meet this ex-wife. I was hoping for her to storm in and say some of the things that like Annie can't say because of the nature of who she is and like what she's designed for. Like, I needed somebody to just come in and be like, Doug, you were disgusting. You were a man-child. Like, why? What are you doing trying to have like a real relationship with a robot? Like a girl who literally cannot defy you, she can't argue with you, she can't make you unhappy. You know, I was just kind of hoping for some kind of confrontation, which doesn't happen. And then two, there's a part in the novel where Annie becomes really interested in robotics. Like, she starts to become interested in her own self and like coding and things like that. And when she's taken into one of her maintenance things, she expresses that she's interested in coding, and they're like, uh-oh, that's not a good thing. Like, robots that become interested in robotics almost always end up tinkering with themselves and fucking shit up. We can't have that. They just sort of heavily discourage her from being interested in that. I really thought that was going to play a much bigger part in the story. I was kind of hoping that she was going to gain some agency through being able to like tinker with herself. And that doesn't really happen. Like, it kind of plays a role later in the story, but not as much as I was hoping. And so it never quite hit that 5-star feeling for me. I think there were a couple of things that could have been better or gone deeper, but otherwise it was, I don't know, it was a good read. I found it very compulsively readable. Like, I had a hard time setting this book down. And I think there's a lot of really interesting commentary in here about toxic relationships, immature men, technology, and autonomy. It was all just very interesting. It was an interesting read. And I would recommend it. But like I said, it is kind of a hard read. So if you have yourself experienced abusive or really toxic relationships, you might want to steer clear. It's going to depend on how triggering that is for you. But yeah, Annie-Bot, 4.5 stars. I highly recommend. All right. And then I read The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. This has been getting a lot of buzz lately, I feel, and for good reason. This is a really slow burn mystery novel about a girl who goes missing from her Adirondack summer camp. But of course, this girl isn't just any girl. She is Barbara Van Laar, the daughter of a very important and influential and rich family. And it is this family that actually owns the summer camp and a lot of the land and the forest. The super weird thing is that she is not the first child of this family to go missing. Her older brother Bear went missing 14 years prior in these very same woods, never to be seen again. It's just really fantastic. It's told in a non-linear fashion, so we're sort of jumping different timelines. We are exploring not only the present day after Barbara has gone missing, but we're also flashing back to when Barbara showed up at camp and her experience at camp and who she was friends with. And we're flashing back all the way to the 1950s when Barbara's parents met and how their family even came to be. And we're flashing forward to the 1960s when her brother first goes missing. And by the way, when I say present day, I mean 1975. That's when the book takes place. So it's just this kind of windy, twisty story, and because it's told in a non-linear fashion, it felt like the story was being told very methodically. I actually really enjoy like non-linear timelines when it's done well, and I felt like this was done very well. We are fed bits of information like exactly when we need them. Of course, it gives the reader the feeling that the author still has things in their pocket that they're keeping from us. We're following a bunch of different perspectives. So we're following Barbara's mother through different points in time, her losing her son and then losing her daughter. We're following Barbara's bunkmate and best friend at camp. We're following some of Barbara's camp counselors, and we're following the investigator who eventually shows up to look into Barbara's disappearance. It's just all woven together so well. Now, I want to say this again. It is a really slow burn, okay? This is nearly a 500-page mystery book. It does not read like a thriller. You know, it's slow paced, it's methodical, but it is very eerie. Like, it has an eeriness and an atmosphere that kept me intrigued and interested the whole time. The character work was so good that I wanted to know what was going to happen to the characters themselves, not just that I wanted to uncover the mystery. And ultimately, I think a good mystery boils down to, were you surprised by the ending? And if you were, does that surprise ending feel satisfying? Does it feel true? Because those things are hard to pull off. It is really hard to pull off both, but it is also really necessary for a mystery novel to feel satisfying and good. And I think this pulls off both beautifully. And it was just really good, okay? It was really, really good. This was a 5-star read for me. I think this is just an absolute knockout of a book. I don't want to hype it up too much because it's not, I don't know that it's for everyone. It is so slow and it is so long. And I think some people, especially if you're not a character-driven reader, like, I don't know that this would be for you, but I loved it. And if you like slow burn mysteries, I think you will love this as well. All right, and then I went on a little horror kick. So first up, I read Bury Your Gaze by Chuck book, Tingle. This is about a Hollywood writer who is the head writer on this hit TV show, and he's been slowly building this romance between his two female leads. One day he gets called into his executive's office and he tells him that the network isn't happy and either he needs to cut the romance altogether, or the romance is allowed to come to a head if and only if shortly afterwards he buries one of his gays. He kills one of them off. And Misha, our main character, being a gay man himself and being gaslit by one of his favorite shows growing up that had a male-male partnership that he highly anticipated was gay and then ended up not being. In fact, there's like an intimate queer moment between the two of them that then is played for laughs. He really hates both of those options. He pretty much tells the executive to shove it. But shortly afterwards, he starts to become haunted by his old horror movie monsters. It was just really good. I enjoyed this a lot. It was eerie, it was creepy. I listened to part of this on audio, and there's this monster character called the Smoker. The way that the audiobook narrator voiced him really freaked me out. I just thought this was all around a really good book. It was scary for a horror book, but it was also funny and it was poignant. It felt nuanced enough to be really interesting commentary. So I really enjoyed this. I gave this 4 stars. And then I read The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monica Kim. And this is another horror novel. We are following Ji-won, who is a Korean American girl. One day, sort of seemingly out of the blue, their father leaves their mother. She is sort of left in shambles. The mother is just a complete disaster after this happens. But a few months later, after some time has passed, their mom seems to be brightening up and seems to be a bit happier, and come to find out that she's dating a new man. But upon meeting this man, both Ji-won and her sister realize that this white man has an Asian fetish, and he is probably only interested in their mother because she's Asian. Simultaneously, Ji-won starts to become very obsessed with eyeballs, and in particular, she becomes consumed with the idea of eating eyeballs. She keeps having dreams and daydreams about eating eyeballs. We watch as this obsession takes over and she becomes a serial killer. This was just a really fascinating book. I enjoyed it a lot. Now, I don't think it's a perfect book. It has a lot of plot holes. There are some things that I think could have been fleshed out better. So for example, Ji-won's obsession with eyeballs starts when she decides to try a fish eyeball that her mom keeps telling her is the best part of the fish, that to eat the eyeball is lucky. Her going from being interested in trying the fish eyeball to then being haunted and like interested in eating human eyeballs happens a little bit too quickly. You know, there are some things that I think could have been done better. That being said though, I absolutely loved this. I had such a good time reading this. I couldn't put it down. I read most of this in one day, save for like the last few chapters that I like could not stay awake for any longer, but it was so good. It's not scary. Like I wouldn't say that I was scared reading this book, but it does obviously involve a lot of body horror. So if you are freaked out by eyeballs or any kind of body horror, probably you want to skip this one. But I thought that the commentary in here was just so interesting. There are several kinds of frustrating men, shall we say, in this novel. This was a debut, I believe, and so I'm really interested to see what else this author comes up with because I will happily read it. And I mean, like, if an eyeball-eating, revenge-seeking female serial killer sounds good to you, I think you will like this. Next, I read So Thirsty by Rachel Harrison. I did really like this one, and I want to say that up front because I'm about to complain about it, but I just want to say that I did actually like this. We are following our main character, Sloane. She's 35 years old in this miserable relationship with her husband, who is like a serial cheater. He just keeps cheating on her and says that he'll stop and then doesn't stop. She absolutely hates getting older. She's gotten to this point in her life where she won't even look in the mirror because she just like can't handle the way that her face has aged. So she's really not looking forward to her 36th birthday, which is coming up, and her husband surprises her with a birthday weekend vacation, but not with him, with Sloane's longtime best friend Naomi. Sloane meets up with Naomi at this like cute little cottage getaway place. The two of them have been friends since college, I believe, so they have this very deep, very long friendship. However, the two of them haven't seen each other in over a year. I would say that they're both a little bit judgmental of each other's life choices. So Naomi is a little bit judgmental of Sloane for having chosen this like very safe, unexciting life, and Sloane is a little bit judgmental of Naomi for gallivanting all over Europe and just like chasing around her rocker boyfriend. And so things are a little bit off between the two of them at the beginning of the novel. They end up going to dinner and Naomi ditches her to go talk to some guy off in a corner for hours on end. And then the next night, Naomi surprises her by dragging her to said guy's party that Sloane does not want to go to. She has no interest whatsoever in going to this stranger's house. At that party, they both end up getting turned into vampires and shenanigans ensue. I did really like this. I gave it a 3.75, but I could have liked it more. And my biggest issue, I think, is that this book just didn't quite know what it wanted to be, and it's trying to do one too many things, and then it doesn't actually sort of do any of those things super well. So it's trying to be a novel about Sloane, the girl who is stuck in this rotting marriage that she just can't seem to get out of, and she is unwilling to leave because it feels safe, and she's willing to just keep forgiving this guy over and over again if it means that she doesn't have to disrupt her life in any way. The girl who dropped out of college because taking on college debt felt unsafe. Like, she's always taken the safe option and done the safe thing. And so it's a novel that's trying to be about getting her to live her life and enjoy life and take risks. It's also a novel about two best friends who are like a little bit out of touch with each other, trying to like come back together and have the same bond that they had once upon a time. And then there's also a sprinkling of like trying to be about women aging and the fear of aging and getting older and being obsolete and invisible. And unfortunately, like I said, I just don't think it quite does any of those things super well. I really, really wanted this to be a book about female friendship. When I read the synopsis, it really felt like the ultimate story was going to be about these two best friends. And even the first chapter of the novel is about this dream that Sloane keeps having of the Dream Mall, which is this mall that she and Naomi keep meeting at. And so the book both begins and ends on this friendship and trying to tell us just how close and important this friendship is. And I absolutely love stories like that. I love stories about female friendship. I love when female friendship is framed as just as important, if not more important, than romantic relationships with men. I feel like I was really led to believe that that's what this story was going to be about, and it just isn't. First of all, I feel like Naomi kind of ends up being like a really bad friend. At least she strikes me as being a really bad friend. She ditches Sloane on her birthday dinner to go talk to some guy for hours and hours. She drags her to a party that she doesn't want to go to and she's clearly really uncomfortable going to. It's used as a framework in the story of like, oh, Sloane, you don't live your life, you don't do anything fun, you're so unwilling to take chances and take risks. But I don't know, like my feelings would probably be hurt if my friend ditched me to go talk to some guy when I hadn't seen them for over a year for my birthday weekend. Like I would be upset if somebody dragged me to a party that I didn't want to go to. But Naomi just really struck me as like very selfish and just like, again, not a good friend. As I kept reading, I was hoping that we were gonna get more of their friendship and we were going to see more of their connection, even just through flashbacks, what they, like what they mean to each other and what they bring to the table for each other. It was just never really obvious. Sloane is very clearly ride or die for Naomi. It just never really made sense to me why, because Naomi is so selfish and self-centered and she just keeps making choices that are very unlikable. And so I was really expecting there to be a lot more development of that friendship and for us to see more, and we really don't. About halfway through, Sloane sort of develops the hots for one of the other vampire guys, and so Naomi takes a back seat, like they don't have that many scenes together. And so not only did the friendship never feel fully developed or realized, in my opinion, the whole theme of like Sloane needing to stop playing it safe and live her life, it was shown through this lens of Naomi's selfishness, which just didn't work. Somebody not wanting to go to a party with a bunch of people that they don't know is sort of put up against the same weight as her staying in this marriage. Like, I feel like I get what the author was trying to do. I just think it could have been done better. My personal biggest disappointment was that the friendship didn't feel as important as I wanted it to. However, that being said, I did really like this writing style. Like, I think Rachel Harrison's writing it was easy to read, it was funny, it was engaging, and I did find the story overall to be quite engaging. I was never bored, I was always interested in the story and where it was going, and I would be interested in reading other books by Rachel Harrison. So, like, I know I'm kind of ragging on it, but it was a good book and I did overall enjoy it. It's just kind of frustrating when you read a book that like really could have been a 5-star book. Like, the ideas were there, it had all the right ingredients, it just didn't quite use them all to their full potential. It was a little disappointing in that regard, but still good, and I would still recommend it, especially if you love vampires and stories about female friendship. Like, it's still here. Like, it's here. It's just not as good as I wanted it to be. So 3.75, a solid spooky time. Next, I read Jacoby by William Ritter, and I'm really glad to have finally gotten around to this. This is like a YA paranormal mystery series set in New England in 1892. We're following Abigail Rook, who is fresh off the boat looking for a job, and she ends up running into Jacoby, a famous investigator who also has the ability to see the paranormal. She gets swept up into becoming his assistant and helping him try to track down a serial killer. It was a lot of fun. I gave it 3 stars. I thought it was a good time. I would have loved this when I was younger. I think, like, if I had found this series when I was an actual teenager, I think I would have really, really loved this. As it stands, it felt a little young, even for YA. Like, not quite a middle grade, but somewhere in that bridge between middle grade and YA. I did enjoy it. It's very quirky. I really enjoy our main character, Abigail. She's clever and feisty. And so I liked it enough to continue on with the series. I will be reading book 2 and seeing how I like it. I'm not committed to reading the whole quartet at this point, but we'll see. If they're all as good as this one, I'd be happy to read them. And yeah, just kind of a fun mystery romp. Like, I don't really have too much to say about this other than it was good, a good time, though I think, you know, I may have like aged out of this just a little bit. All right, and there you have it. Those are all of the books that I have read recently. If you have read any of these books yourself, please let me know your thoughts. I would love to chat about them in the comments. Are you interested in reading any of these books now that you've heard me talk about them? I would love to know that as well. If you're interested in what books I'm planning to read in the upcoming months, I will have my most recent TBR here for you. Please like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you want to see more from me. I hope to see you next time. Bye!